this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get started today in our interview with Michelle, I just wanted to play a quick message from our sponsor.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making the lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Michelle Briscoe. She is the COO and CFO of Talus Bio. Michelle's a seasoned executive with over 26 years of experience leading scientific organizations in the Seattle area, currently serving as the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. So with that, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Hello from Seattle.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. And obviously I'm traveling. It's not my normal background, but it's a good time to have a great conversation with you about you and your career journey and everything that you did. I could only imagine all the things that would lead you to a double chief executive role in an organization. So would you just take a little bit of time and tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up on the Oregon coast and fell in love with science at a very young age because I had a really great high school science teacher who really made the subject exciting. So I went to school and I thought I wanted to be a high school science teacher for about 3 weeks and very quickly moved out of the education department and decided to just pursue the sciences. So I ended up graduating with majors in chemistry and physics and minors in biology and math. So I wasn't as well-rounded as my school counselor might have liked me to be because I didn't leave the science buildings very often, but I really loved it a lot. Day after graduation, moved to Seattle and got my first job working as an analytical chemist at a pretty small environmental testing lab and just kind of learned the basics of what working in a professional laboratory as opposed to an academic laboratory was like. 3 years later, I moved to a very specialized analytical chemistry company that did ultra trace detection and speciation of trace metals. So this is a very narrow niche in the analytical chemistry lab world. There were just a few labs in the country that were doing what we did. And it turns out I loved it. And I spent the next 25 years in that industry in 2 different companies, but companies that were doing this very specialized niche. Moved from the bench into laboratory management, realized that was really my calling. I loved the science, but I really found that I loved doing the leadership side more. Moved from that into VP of operations, and then at the last company I was at was CEO for 8 years at that company before selling it in 2020. And that was the pandemic. So I took a breath and really decided what I wanted to do next. Took a little time to contemplate my next move. And what I was really excited about was the thriving biotech industry that was developing in Seattle. And I was ready for something different, to get out of the industry I was in and to really have new challenges and learn new things. And so that's how I came to be at Talus Bio. I started there as their COO in 2022 and took the CFO role earlier this summer.
That's perfect. And I mean, I know in small companies that you wear a lot of hats. I mean, it's just the kind of the natural transition that I feel like a lot of people make. But how has your overall experience sort of led to where you are now? How have you wound up, with your journey leading you to this point?
I think when I decided to move away from the bench and sort of take a desk job, I wasn't 100% sure that's what I wanted to do, but I was sort of given an ultimatum by the person who owned the lab at the time, who said, "You're going to go back to grad school, and we'll support that, or you're going to go into leadership. But we don't think you can do both. You can't be a brilliant scientist and run the company." So I chose a path, and it turned out it was really the right choice for me, because while I love the science and I love learning about what we do, I learn so much every day working with the scientists that I work with. I really found that what gets me excited to go to work every day is the people, and building an organization and building a company and doing all that minutia planning that most people hate, that I love, to help really let an organization thrive and let the people within it thrive. So that's kind of what led me to this. The finance side just comes with it. I mean, as CEO, I did a lot of finance. We were too small at my last company to have a CFO. So as CEO, I ended up taking on that role as well. And Talus is pretty small. We have 17 employees. So there isn't a lot of overhead staff. So it just naturally was a natural path to sort of migrate into doing CFO, COO work, especially because I came into this industry from being a CEO, but it was an industry where I didn't know a lot about the industry at all. So I really had to start learning from the ground up. And these were great roles to do that in, where I didn't need to know a lot about transcription factors or drug discovery.
Yeah, it could be an educational journey at the very least. So could you tell us just a little bit about Talus Bio and what it is that you're working on? What is your mission, and who are you trying to help?
Yeah, Talus Bio is a drug discovery platform company, and we have a mission of drugging the undruggable, and that's to focus on drugging transcription factors. Because for a long time, drugging transcription factors was considered undruggable because it's just very difficult. It's hard to figure out how they're going to react when they're in a cell, because all the experiments were being done out of a cell. So what the co-founders of Talus Bio came together to do was bring a strong drug discovery background and a strong proteomics mass spec background to create this platform that could very rapidly do screens that could test small molecules against thousands of proteins, and then use an AI algorithm to very quickly figure out where those interactions are happening. So it speeds up the drug discovery process to levels that have not been seen before.
Amazing. And just to focus in on you, how does your role as the COO and CFO, too many C's in there,
Sorry.
contribute to the goal of really, targeting previously undruggable transcription factors?
This company, it's based on the people and the scientists that work there, right? Because they are the ones that every day are coming in with these new creative ideas of how to achieve these goals to accomplish this mission, which is getting new drugs to patients that previously didn't have therapeutic options. And so my job is just to make sure they have everything they need and the atmosphere where they can really have professional development to allow them to achieve their goals. So that's everything from, the infrastructure, the building, the footprint, making sure we have the space we need, making sure they have the instrumentation they need, all of the laboratory assets necessary to do their best work, but also do it at the pace that being a VC-funded company requires, which is, you have to meet milestones by every different fundraising round. So making sure that they have what they need to do the work, but also making sure that they have a work environment that makes them excited to come to work every day and helps them to achieve what they need to achieve, because it's scientifically stimulating and it's welcoming, and they feel like a sense of belonging when they walk in the door.
Yeah, I feel like from an operations perspective, right? I mean, you've always got to be focused on the here and now, but also sort of out in the future as well, in terms of, like, I mean, are you going to have any problems that somebody hasn't, for some reason, thought through and made sure that for whatever reason that you have the right equipment, that you have the right, buildings, lab space, what have you. And then on the other side, I mean, because I do see the synergy as well with the CFO, right? Because I feel like the CFOs are doing the work of not only telling the story of where we are today, and what is current performance financially today, but also looking out into the future as well, and just saying, hey, look, you're either going to have, sort of the opportunity to continue to grow, or maybe we have to do something different to try and meet those other goals. I do see the synergy in the two roles, but I do feel like it's got to be a challenge, at times to just manage the overall scope of that as well. Because I mean, it is a broad amount of responsibility that you must have.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it can be a lot to juggle sometimes, but it's not uncommon in small biotechs to have someone sort of serving both of these roles, especially in these companies that are founded by scientific co-founders who aren't coming into the company with an extensive background in how to run a company or how to manage the finances of a company. Sometimes they're busier than others. We just finished fundraising and we just closed an amazing round. And that was very exciting, but that also means I was very focused on that for a while. So now I get to completely change my focus and say, okay, now how are we going to deploy these resources? How are we going to make sure that not only are we spending them really wisely to make sure that we can achieve our goals for this next time period, but also that we have enough runway to last that whole time. We're not spending it too fast. We're like being metered about it. And that we go into our next fundraising round with enough to make sure that even if the markets are still as bad as they've been recently, we've got enough to get through to that next stage. It's a completely new business model for me, because both of the companies that I ran previously, they were bootstrap companies. They were companies that had almost no outside investment, and we had to grow the company and live off our profits. And so this VC funding model has been a learning experience for me, for sure.
And what a time to be involved as well. I mean, it is a great learning experience, I'm sure. But at the same time, I mean, seeing some of the challenges that many life sciences companies have been in. But as I look at the story of Talus and kind of your differing level of model with regards to drug discovery methods, it probably would be good to just talk a little bit about that as well. I mean, what is the real difference from traditional drug discovery to what you're doing at Talus?
So one of the main differences is the way we're approaching it. So we are using a proteomics mass spec basis for our platform. And that allows us to do the targeting or the drugging of these targets with small molecules in live cells, and then analyze those using HPLC mass spec to produce a very large data set that then gets fed into our AI models to help quickly discover where there were the types of small molecule protein interactions that we're looking for, but also it feeds our AI model to help us predict where we're going to find those interactions in the future. So we can validate that a drug is hitting its target more quickly using mass spec, but we can also predict new molecules that'll be able to do the same thing.
Very good. And can you talk about one particular project or initiative that you're particularly proud of with regards to something that you've worked on at Talus?
Yeah, sure. So our very first program, which was really more of a proof of concept program, was looking at small molecules that could interact with breakiary, which is the transcription factor that encodes TBXT, which is known to be a significant driver of the cancer chordoma. And chordoma is a relatively rare cancer. Only about 300 people in the US get this cancer each year. So there isn't a huge market for this, but it was really important, I think, because it showed how our platform works. But also, it became really impactful early on, because right after we decided to make public that this was like our first proof of concept program, I was at an event with our law firm, and one of the lawyers was talking to me about what we're doing, and I mentioned this program. Again, from a very non-scientific standpoint, because a lot of what the science is a little over my head that's done at my company. But I mentioned it, and she immediately like broke into tears, and turns out her father had chordoma. So of the 300 people in the US per year that are diagnosed with chordoma, her father was one of them. And I had, it was really meaningful, because then it brought home like what we're doing. And even if this drug never makes it to market, which I hope isn't the case, but you know how hard it is to get things through the drug regulatory and approval process. I know that just knowing someone was working on it had a huge impact on her. So she came to the company and she spoke about how meaningful it was to have us working on this, and how proud they were to be our law firm. And that was great. So that was one early success that we had that I was really proud of, because the initial data on that looked really good, and it was exciting. Another thing I'm just super excited about is we are building this massive data set, and this data set is going to be able to be mined for all kinds of different applications, not just within oncology, but in all kinds of diseases. To the best of our knowledge, we have the largest proteomics data set in the world. So being able to create this data set that can be used maybe not just by our company, but by other companies to help discover new drugs and to help people who have various types of diseases. That's super exciting. And it's only going to grow as time goes on, because every time we do a new scan, it just gets loaded with thousands, millions of new data points.
That's excellent. Sounds exciting by far. And I kind of, kind of think the same thing. I mean, every time somebody talks about, they're running next generation sequencing, platforms with, again, they've built their own pipeline or AI, sort of capability. It is similarly, it does the same sort of thing. It's you think about the potential of all of this data eventually being able to be used to say, you specifically follow a similar path as this other individual that seemed to, react in one way or the other because we had the data. Seems like such a great future, but also just understanding what's happening with cancer even further. Also, similarly, seems like something that would be a great use of all of the information that we currently have at our fingertips today.
Yeah, it's certainly an area that's, growing exponentially right now, and that's super exciting.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I was most interested with regards to you and your background and things like that is that you seem to really care a lot about creating a workplace that people are really wanting to come to, where they want to be engaged and valued. Can you tell me how you're doing that at Talus?
Yeah, well, it's a goal, right? You can't just make it happen. I couldn't walk in and say, "Here's the culture we're going to have." It's something we have to sort of lean into and work on every day. But I do try right from the get-go to sort of culture set with new employees as they're coming on. I always meet with new employees the very first day, and I talk a little bit about myself, and I talk a little bit about my personal life and my journey, and I will say things that subtly let them know that this is a place that's welcoming and open and inviting to everyone. I'll mention my ex-wife, I'll mention my son that we adopted, and just try to set the tone for the culture we want, which is one of openness and honesty and transparency. And then we just try to live that every day at work. We're very transparent with the staff about where we are financially, about decisions that we make, both about personnel decisions or scientific decisions. And we just try to make sure that they feel like they're coming along for the ride and not just sitting in the back on the ride, right? We want them to know they're helping to steer.
Yeah, it's also important, and you're right. I mean about the culture, but at the same time, it was funny because I was with a company that was at where you're at this point, and then I helped to grow them to 250 people. And I remember we were hiring somewhere around 120, somewhere around in there. We were hiring somebody. So I was conducting an interview, still sitting with one of the founders, and happened to mention the fact that I felt like the culture that I walked into at 20 people is very similar at 120. It hadn't changed overall as a culture inside the organization. Obviously, the structure and the size and the ability to connect was changing because of our size, but I did feel like the same level of being innovative and continually problem solving, being team players, all of those things were kind of coming along with everybody as well inside of the organization. I remember just sitting there, and the founder just said, look, I wonder this all the time, and it's good to hear confirmation as a part of this interview process. So anyway, it was interesting to me to think that you might lose your culture also as you grow.
Yeah, so the last two companies that I led before this one, I started at both of them at single digits headcount. Same at Talus. We were single digit headcount when I started. And both of those companies over my tenure, we grew to be about 60, 70 people. And so that does cross the threshold where it becomes a little bit harder to know everyone, to know their dog's name and find out what they did on the weekend and all the things that kind of keep you tight knit. But I was very proud of the fact that the culture did not deteriorate over time as we did that growth. And I've talked to a lot of people who've since left those companies because both of them hired a lot of entry-level staff. So there tend to be a fair amount of churn with early career people who are coming in and sort of testing the waters. Do I want to be an analytical chemist? Do I want to work in a lab? And so a lot of them would stay for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then they might find something they really were passionate about and move on. And Seattle's a small town, so I end up running into a lot of those people over time, and they will say, like, I didn't really know how great it was until I left, because it's not until you see something else that you realize the culture that you had and how much you valued that. And that's been one of the most meaningful things that I've heard over time from my former employees.
Yeah. Also important. You have also have a lot of experience with M&A and post-acquisition integration. How has that influenced your leadership style at Talus?
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it a lot of experience, but I did have a really good experience of at my last company of acquiring another company. And that company was very complementary to us in both our strengths and our weaknesses. They definitely were bringing to the table some really important skill sets that we were lacking, and vice versa. So it was a really good mix on paper. And as we started to work through the integration post-merger, we realized this was going to take some diligence, because you can't just come in and say, well, we're the bigger company, we're acquiring you, so we're going to do everything our way because we know it's the right way. It was humbling. We really learned we weren't doing everything the best way, because we laid all of our practices and policies related to both HR, but also like scientific policies. We laid them on the table and we saw, they were actually doing some things that we thought were much smarter, much better. And we merged those two cultures together to kind of create the best practices from both in one organization. So it was a good learning experience. Doing integration is always tough, but I was really proud of where we ended up there. And we had very little loss of staff over that time period, even though we moved the company from, a vibrant downtown neighborhood to a quiet suburban business park. So I was a little worried about that, but we were able to retain our staff through the integration time, and it went pretty well. So what that really taught me was to come into each situation with an open mind and not thinking you know the best way just because you've done it before and you've been doing it for decades, right? Like come in with an open mind, listen to new ideas, and be willing to change your mind.
I mean, it is an interesting thing because there is this, acquiring versus acquired company kind of feeling that happens. I think typically with any merger that happens, but it is an interesting proposal. I mean, whenever you think about it, as it should be a real time for you to reflect on who's doing what better than the other company, and based on that, make a decision there, and then pivot if you have to. If you're the acquiring company, you bought this other company for a reason, and hopefully to not just gain technology or clients or whatever. Hopefully there's a good long-term advantage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though we were the bigger company, we really tried to treat it as a true merger, as the two companies coming together as equals in terms of the science that we were doing and the structure of the company that we wanted to put together. It was really good. It worked out really well, and that it was 5 years later that then we were acquired by a much larger company.
I mean, to me, that's a lot of experience. I could think of a lot of people that haven't been through two. So I've certainly seen my fair share. But I could think of a lot of people who either haven't experienced any or have been through one round only on one side, right? So it's a good thing. So
yeah, those are very different scenarios, doing an acquisition or a merger versus like preparing your company to be acquired.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So as you think about the life sciences industry, so this is just you thinking about kind of the broader landscape of things, where do you see kind of the greatest advantages coming in, and where do you hope that things go?
So, like I said, I'm relatively new to this industry. I've just been in it for like 2.5 years now. So I still have a lot to learn. I certainly have been very impressed with the way AI is being used to drive the science behind a lot of the companies that are doing drug discovery, whether that be small molecule or cell-based or immuno-based. I think that the use of AI is making everything go faster. And that's really exciting because the process to get a drug to a patient is already slow enough. So if we can speed up the discovery process and get things to clinic faster, I think it has a huge impact. So from a very 40,000 foot level, that's one thing that I see that's very exciting. It was eye-opening to learn more about this business, not just this business model, but the process for how a drug actually gets to a patient and how many hurdles there are and how hard it is and how expensive it is and how long it takes. And I really knew nothing about that before coming in. So I am hopeful that the industry can work on those areas to try to reduce that time and that cost. That would be beneficial, I think, to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think that some of the things that are currently going on with AI might help to accelerate things. Although I think the regulators are trying their best to improve the cycle time, I also think that if we were to see any sort of real drastic change, it would have been around the time of COVID. From my perspective, it's we would have seen not just acceleration of vaccines, but now acceleration of a lot of other things in the marketplace. And this goes back quite a few episodes, but I mean I know I talked a lot about that quite a while ago as well. So just to focus a few more questions on you, Michelle, what inspires you?
I think the thing I like the most is when I see the scientists in my companies, any of them that I've worked at, have a great creative idea and be able to see that through to something really meaningful and impactful, and seeing how excited they get about it, seeing them honored for their achievements. I really like that, because I really see my job as providing the foundation for that to happen. So that's something that inspires me when I think about why I want to go to work every day. It's for the people there and for them to be able to achieve these scientific goals that they're setting their mind to. It's very exciting.
Excellent. And what concerns you?
I have a son turning 18 in a couple months. That's the state of the world right now has been on my mind a lot, and this world that he's going to be launching into as an adult very soon. I think that there is a new level of aggressiveness towards people who are different than you that is a little is concerning, and to the point of shocking sometimes. So I'm probably most concerned just about that, and really hopeful that we can do better at just accepting people and caring about people and being kind.
Yeah, what an important thing to keep in mind, especially, I was talking to somebody earlier today, just to think of, not to make this a political statement, but that just to think of the state of the world today, and the fact that, we've had 2 attempts on one president, no attempts on the other, but yet just so much violence kind of around both candidates politically. It just kind of, even, calls things out further, and let alone, the other things that you see happening with regards to, people getting pulled over and beat up and things like that. I mean, it's just an amazing thing to think about how much of a reset we really need. And, we really need to try and find a better path forward as well, to your point. So good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes beyond the US borders, right? I mean, the conflicts that are happening around the world are just, they're soaked in injustice and misery. And it's really hard to see how people can not be focused on trying to solve that with more energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Last question. What excites you?
Excites me. Well, this is a non-work related topic, but I'm always most excited about whatever trip I'm planning next. I love to travel. I love to explore different countries and cities and really immerse myself in different cultures and try to learn about them, not just as a tourist, but try to spend enough time there that you really get a feel for, how people live and how the culture is really different. So when I need to stop thinking about work or fundraising or the budget for a little while, I pull out a guidebook and start planning my next trip. And hopefully one that my son can go on with me, because taking trips with my kid has been about the most exciting thing I've done the last few years. Yeah, he's still at that age he wants to travel with mom, so it won't last much longer.
That's what I was going to say. On the other side of things, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing to kind of get out and about and see the world and know that the world is a big place. I mean, not to say that you don't live in one of those great places as well, to sort of know that we're not the most significant thing around, right? To stand on some of the mountains in Seattle, just as an amazing thing, and to visit the city and other things is an amazing place as well. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that as well.
Yeah, no problem. You got to come out and visit us again soon. Yeah.
Sure. I'm always up for a hike in and around that area. So, well, Michelle Briscoe, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. Thanks a lot for telling us about Talus Bio. You really are an amazing person, and I really appreciate your time and taking time out to spend with me and tell me a little bit about yourself and Talus. So thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks, Don. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.